Anybody, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
What'd you say, Denise?
Okay, let me see what's going on.
Wayne, you are so bad sometimes.
Okay. Can you hear us, Delegate Roberts? Is that? Delegate Roberts, can you hear us?
I think not.
I think not. Okay.
I'll go help her troubleshoot.
We're
Hold
gonna.
on. He's down the hall, but I'll stay on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Can you hear
Okay.
us?
Okay, great. Hopefully,
Okay, good. We're all good. We're all good, Joe. If you can hear us. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully Delegate Vogel will be there. He is. Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Revenue Subcommittee. It is February 19th. It is not 4 p.m. It is getting awfully close to 6 p.m. And I know we've all been through a long bill hearing this afternoon. So I'm going to try to move quickly. However, if you have any questions or need clarification, please speak up, and we will take the time to make sure everyone has their questions answered. But moving right along, I'd like to start with House Bill 603. This is the Earned Income Tax Credit Notice of Eligibility. And this allows the Comptroller's Office to provide notice to employers electronically rather than through physical snail mail. Any questions or discussion?
Move favorable.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye. All right. Any opposed? Beautiful. All right. Moving right along. House Bill 603 moves forward with a favorable recommendation. House Bill 614, this is the local earned income tax credit calculation for county income tax rates. We do have an amendment for this bill. This is recognizing that if a county has a marginal income tax rate, that it is calculated based on the lowest marginal income tax rate that the county uses. And the amendment,
I'm sorry, what bill number are you on?
this is 614.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
And the amendment, and Mr. Butler, please jump in if you think we need to add more, but the amendment simply clarifies that that if they have marginal tax rates, it's using the lowest rate, and if it is a flat rate, then that is the rate used in the calculation.
That's correct.
Okay.
If they have one or more flat rates, then it's the applicable rate and filing status that's established by the county.
Okay. Is there a motion on the amendment?
Move the amendment.
second.
Okay, any questions or discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, that's unanimous. On the bill as amended.
Move favorable.
Second.
Okay, any questions or discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, wonderful. House Bill 614 is moving forward with favorable with amendment as our recommendation. House Bill 617. This is clarifying. This is again for the Comptroller's Office, recording and monitoring telephone calls, and this bill is clarifying that it's only the call center calls that may be recorded and monitored, and so this is a quality control measure. Anything Any questions or discussion?
It just removes archaic language, correct?
Yes, that is my understanding. Delegate Vogel, did you have a?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What's the retention policy in terms of how long the recordings are kept? Does that change under this bill?
Not to my knowledge, but please go ahead and this is why we have experts from the comptroller's office join us to answer questions. Please go ahead, Mr.
Certainly, no. The retention policy has not changed. I believe we are able to retain these recordings for 90 days, and that remains the same. The only thing this bill is doing is removing the reference to an automated call distribution system and just replacing it with kind of agnostic language about calls into our call centers.
Great, thank you. In that case, I would move favorable.
Second. Wonderful. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Wonderful. House Bill 617 is moving forward with a favorable recommendation. And finally, House Bill 619. This is sales and use tax, sales between cannabis businesses and cannabis nurseries exemption. This simply exempts the business to business sales from the sales and use tax. Any questions or discussion on that? Delegate Hartman.
So currently, I guess there's a tax liability for those transactions now.
The bill is more clarifying in nature. It explicitly exempts sales and use tax for sales of cannabis between licensed cannabis businesses and registered cannabis nurseries. There's a current exemption already for sales between cannabis businesses that are licensed under Title 36 of the Alcoholic Beverages and Cannabis article, but these nurseries are registered as opposed to licensed. To that end, it's just clarifying in nature. The revenues were not previously factored into any estimates previously, and currently there's no registered nurseries currently to my knowledge, and so as a result there is no revenue impact.
So by changing this, though, we could eliminate a revenue stream that we may so desperately need. Correct?
I don't believe that it was ever your intent to capture these transactions.
You're speaking of my intent?
That could be your intent, sir. I can't say.
So I believe the bill is meant to make explicit what we believe the legislative intent was when we exempted sales and use tax between licensed cannabis businesses. Nurseries are registered, not licensed. So it's, I believe, a clarification on a technicality.
But we're taxing everything we can possible right now. Someone was in my office earlier taking the cushions out of the couch looking for change. And I'm just at a loss as to why we would be granting a tax relief to this industry when we're in such dire need of money.
Mr. Butler, can you speak to is sales and use tax generally charged business to business?
Generally, there's I would say attempts to avoid tax pyramiding, and that's what this would seek to accomplish. Once again, would be consistent with the other transactions between licensed cannabis businesses.
Thank you. Delegate Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you just kind of give me an example, provide an example of how this tax is, I guess, administered or applied? Just an example of, say a business here, a business there, selling something versus selling something to somebody else. Just so I'm clear on what exactly, exactly.
Sure. I think I believe Mr. Spitzik may want to answer that.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to.
I'm not sure if that was, if you were raising your hand to speak to that or for something else, but go ahead.
Sure. You know, I'm happy to kind of talk about how this currently works. So there are a number of business-to-business exemptions, and Mr. Butler is absolutely correct. Largely, they are to avoid tax pyramiding because ultimately this is just between one business and another business for resale, and so there's still going to be a sales tax charged at the final point of sale. And so when the Cannabis Reform Act was put into place, there was explicit language saying that, you know, resale between two licensed cannabis businesses would be exempt. Now, if it was not exempt, we would then need to kind of put in place a process of audits, which is how we enforce compliance on any of our tax systems. There's always, kind of speaking to the earlier point of well, will this be a revenue generator? Obviously, we can't say, and we're not really. Our understanding was that the intent of making a cannabis nursery registered rather than licensed, it just hadn't been considered that this would have the impact that it does of having them not be exempt under this existing law that was put in place under the Cannabis Reform Act. But there are currently no cannabis nurseries that are registered right now. So it would be speculative as to what kind of revenue taxing them both on a sale between two licensed businesses and on that final point of sale would generate. It is entirely possible if the sales are minimal that it would cost more in terms of actually auditing and enforcing this tax than it would generate. So it's not always a strict,
Okay, I got Delegate Vogel with his hand up, and then I'll get back to you, Delegate Hartman.
Sorry, just to be very clear, and I'm looking at the fiscal note. The fiscal note notes that this is largely clarifying in that there are no impact on revenues. So Delegate Hartman, I think that also gets to your question. According to the fiscal note, there are no impacts on revenues. Is that correct, Matthew?
That is absolutely correct. And again, that's I don't know specifically if this was why they said that there's no impact on revenues, but it would not change any existing revenue structures because, again, there are no registered cannabis nurseries. There's the possibility that a registered cannabis nursery could be added down the line.
Okay, Delegate Hartman.
So there's no fiscal note because there are currently no nurseries, but if a nursery did open, if this was left intact, then there would be a revenue stream from it, correct?
Theoretically, again, we'd have to balance the cost of enforcement and the cost of compliance.
Okay, and you said we typically don't stack taxes. So help me understand the difference between the stacking here. How is this any different than what was proposed by an excise tax on guns? Help me understand the difference, because right now I'm thinking this is very hypocritical.
So, Delegate Hartman, that is a proposed bill and one that this subcommittee has not taken up yet. So I don't want to get into a discussion of that bill. We're going to focus on.
I'm asking for the bill that I mentioned, the gun excise tax. If we don't typically stack, if that's the conversation here, that bill, I'm asking the comptroller's office, would that be an example of stacking? And if so, help me understand why we do it sometimes and sometimes we don't.
While I can't speak to the specific bill, when we talk about tax pyramiding, and this is just from a general tax policy perspective, the comptroller is not putting in any sort of position on whether we support implementing one tax or not. That's ultimately the will of the General Assembly. But when we talk about tax pyramiding, we typically are referring to within one tax type. So like sales and use tax being charged on the same product multiple times throughout the chain is when we have this tax pyramiding. Excise tax is typically, and again, I'm talking generally, I don't have the specifics of the bill that you're referring to at hand, but in general, an excise tax is not actually an excise tax, even though it can be similar because it's tax on a product is separate from a sales and use tax. So like an excise tax on alcohol comes in when the distributor brings alcohol into the state. And that is separate from the sales and use tax. That is the final point of sale tax. Now, granted, those distributors, they pass on those costs. The distributors that are bringing the alcohol into the state in the terms of an alcohol excise tax, they're paying that. Perhaps they pass those costs on when they're selling it out, but it's not, there's no tax on the sale. If that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining that clearly, but it's
Right.
they're considered two separate tax types. That's generally the case with excise taxes. Although again, I don't want to speak to any specific.
Thank you.
Just to clarify though, this could essentially be taking away a potential revenue stream if a nursery were to exist, correct? Or if nurseries were to exist.
If it is the will of the legislature, if it is the will of the General Assembly to have this type of business-to-business transaction tax, then yes, theoretically could generate revenue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question is, just so I'm understanding correctly, if there aren't any nurseries that they exist, but they're just may not be licensed, is that correct?
The registration,
No, they're not registered.
the registration was just put in place last year in the Cannabis Reform Alterations Bill. As of now, there are not any, the Cannabis Administration has not registered any nurseries yet.
Which means, thank you, you answered the question, but which means that we have not received any taxes as a result of this anyway, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Delegate Plokovic-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move favorable.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any additional discussion or questions? Oh, Delegate Young?
Yeah, I was a little late, Madam Chair. Can you just confirm which bill we're on?
We are on House Bill 619. This is eliminating the sales and use tax between a licensed cannabis business and a registered cannabis nursery.
Thank you. Understood.
Okay. All right. With that, all in favor, please raise your hand. And any opposed? Okay. House Bill 619 moves forward, not unanimously, but with a recommendation to the full committee for favorable. So that concludes our agenda for this evening. Thank you all. Have a good evening, and we will see you tomorrow. Take care.
Thanks for the healthy conversation.